Most people walk into stores like Tractor Supply and think it's just another place for farm supplies, feed, tools, random hardware, nothing urgent, nothing they need to think too much about, but if you pay attention, certain items don't stay on the shelves for long. Not because they're flashy, not because they're trending, but because they quietly solve problems people don't want to deal with later, and the people who understand that don't wait. They buy early, they buy consistently, and they focus on things that actually work when you need them. So instead of walking past everything, let's go through 10 cheap items that tend to disappear first, and why they matter more than they seem. Start with water storage containers. These are easy to overlook, they just sit there on the shelf. Plastic containers, stackable jugs, nothing special, until you realize how useful they are, because once you need to store water, you don't want to figure it out last minute. You want something clean, durable, and ready to use. That's why these go early. They're simple, but they solve a basic problem immediately. Next is animal feed buckets. Even if you don't own animals, these are extremely practical, they're durable, easy to carry, and hold a decent amount of weight. People use them for water, storage, and transporting supplies. They're cheap, reusable, and honestly, surprisingly useful in more ways than one, which is why they don't stay on shelves when demand increases. Now look at heavy-duty tarps. These don't seem important at first, just folded sheets of material, but they solve multiple problems instantly. Covering equipment, blocking wind, creating temporary shelter. They're flexible, reusable, and reliable. That's what makes them valuable. Not what they are, but what they can become. Now something smaller, work gloves. Simple, easy to ignore, but essential when you actually need them. They protect your hands, make handling materials easier, and last longer than you expect. People who think ahead don't skip these. They pick them up early, because they know they'll need them eventually. Now move into something people don't expect. Feed-grade grains, things like corn or oats. These aren't just for animals, they're basic bulk food sources, cheap, long-lasting, and easy to store. They don't look appealing, but they serve a purpose, and that's why they move quietly off shelves. Now look at basic hand tools, hammers, wrenches, multi-purpose tools. Nothing fancy, but reliable. When something breaks, you don't want to rely on finding tools, you want them already there. That's why these don't stay in stock during high demand. People grab them early, not because they need them now, but because they know they will. Now something people underestimate. Portable heaters, especially smaller, simple ones. They're not always in demand, until they are, and when that shift happens, they disappear quickly. Because staying warm becomes a priority fast, and people who understand that don't wait until temperatures drop. Now look at fuel containers, another item people ignore until they need it. They sit there, unnoticed, but when you need to store fuel safely, you realize just how important they are. Strong, sealed, reliable. That's why they don't last on shelves when people start preparing. Now, here's something simple but, often overlooked. Rope and cord. It really doesn't look like much at first glance, but honestly, it's one of the most versatile items you can have around. Tying, securing, fixing, there's just so much you can do with it. You don't realize how often you need it, until, well, you don't have it, and that's exactly why it quietly disappears. Now, here's something that surprises people. Bulk salt. We're talking large bags, usually the kind you see for livestock, but it's also super useful for preservation, cooking, and just general use. It stores well, lasts a long time, and has a bunch of different uses. That's why folks pick it up early, even if they don't need it right away. Now, let's just step back for a moment. None of these items are complicated, right? They're not high-tech or anything fancy, they're not even expensive, but they do have something in common. They solve real, everyday problems. That's really the pattern here. The items that disappear first aren't the ones that look impressive, they're just the ones that work. Now, imagine walking into a store and, well, everything looks normal. The shelves are stocked, nothing feels urgent. But if you look a little closer, a few sections seem just a bit lighter, maybe a few items are missing, and it's the same items each time. That's how it starts. Not empty shelves, just these quiet changes. Most people don't notice that. They just keep shopping the same way, buying what they always buy. But some people, they see it differently. They notice patterns, they understand which items really matter. And yeah, they act early. Now here's the important part. It's not about copying what others buy, it's about understanding why. Because once you understand the reason behind it, you don't need to react. You can plan. Water containers solve storage, tarps solve coverage, buckets solve transport, tools solve problems. Every item has a function, and that's what makes them valuable. Now think about how most people shop. They focus on comfort, convenience, familiar items. But when things change, that approach doesn't work. Function matters more than preference. That's why these items disappear first. Not because of hype, but because they make sense. Now, look at your own habits. What do you usually buy? Would it still help you if things changed? Or would you realize you're missing something basic? Because that's what this comes down to. Not having more, but having the right things. Most people don't think like this, until they need to. And by then, it's already obvious what they should have picked up earlier. So next time you're in a store like this, don't just look at what's there. Look at what's missing. Look at what's moving. Because that tells you everything. And once you start paying attention, you'll see the same pattern everywhere. The simplest items are usually the ones that matter most.